Doctor. Hi there. Okay, now I'm Clifford Bates. We're looking strange over here because the camera's over here. I'm going to look over here for a second. Um, Welcome. This is my first attempt at the new attempt at revitalizing my web Yahoo YouTube channel. Today, as I said in my thumbnail for this, I want to talk about what I think I want to talk about the concept of soft power and how the concept has basically been wholly misabused and abused. Okay, okay, this is annoying, but we'll see what happens. I'm gonna move this a little bit just to kind of get a better set of this. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about this. We're getting this a little like this and like that, and I'll look right into the camera. I should have it over there, looking over there, but there. Okay, I think the camera up there would have been better. Okay, again, we're playing around, experimenting. The concept of soft power was actually apparently coined by Philip Joe Nye, the American political scientist Joe Nye. This is his 2004 book, where he attempted to kind of give the general introduction explaining soft power. What is soft power? Well, soft power is this idea that, it's contrasted to hard power. Hard power is coercion, force, use of economic activity, things like this. And it is very much tied to I can't do this. I can't change anything. I was hoping I would be able to change something, but no. Okay, so I have to, next time I'll do this, I'll be more careful with the camera. Like I see, I'm learning how to use the new camera and things like this. And this is going to be a little bit confusing. What is the most interesting aspect of soft power was that it was something that came up as in light of what we call after the Cold War. It was Nye wanted to explain why American power abroad, even though why was trying to understand the full character and development of American power abroad, and particularly the power and attract to achieve goals without necessarily using hard power. Now, hard power is which is clearly, as Nye always talks about, is not only coercion. People often think it's about military force, threats, coercion, this things. No, it's not only that. Nye clearly argues that hard power is carrots, sticks, and carrots and sticks. So it's not only things like military threat, coercion, and things like that, but also trade, positive, buying people, use of money. Therefore, trade and economic activities are an aspect of hard power. Soft power was this idea of attractiveness. In other words, something that's like cool. People who and therefore, because people like you, and people are attracted to you, and people like what you stand for and like what you are, and therefore they want to imitate you, or they will be favorable to you. And this is what Nye tried to explain, what the role of American power globally was tied to this concept he called soft power. Now, as he argues in his book, when you ask people, and because of this is one of the concepts in IR among international students. When I first came to Poland and Eastern Europe in the early 1999 and end of the 90s and early thousands, one of the biggest shock was when students talking about soft power. They're talking about German soft power or Russian soft power or Chinese soft power in terms of economic activity. They would say, "Oh no, China." Like I would have students write papers and talk about Chinese soft power, about the banks and the businesses, like UI, Huawei 5G globally in here is an aspect of Chinese soft power. The creation of what we call these Chinese institutes, both in the United States, they have a different name in the US as they have here. These various Chinese institutes pushing China. Well, often what happens here, people think they say, well, this is elements of soft power. But people don't go often. Yes, you can say some people might go there because they like the culture and things like that. But a lot of people will go there or associate with it because of the business ties, the economic, the advantage. Now, that is hard power, not soft power. So when people talk about the role of like Huawei and 5G and things like this as aspects of Chinese soft power, they fundamentally misunderstand what a soft power is. Soft power it's not about making money. Again, that's hard power. Money making, interest making, benefit. If I'm giving you benefit, that is hard power. Therefore, this is a very interesting problem. The failure to properly understand what soft power is leads to a fundamental misunderstanding of what hard power is. They often understand hard power to mean only violence, only coercion. But economic activity is as much an aspect of power. And also, not only economic activity, but let's say even aspects of like terrorism. It's hard. We think terrorism is clearly violence, right? But what about the interference in e-commerce, hacking, and things like this? Today, we engage. In other words, the violence is much more complicated. To what degree is canceling people, not a form of, is canceling people, using social pressure to ostracize and to punish people? How is this not violence? It is violence. The way the woke mob uses Twitter as a mechanism to silence and quiet people and destroy their lives, that is a form of hard power. And therefore we have to understand that there's the difference between me coming with a baseball bat and beating you over the head versus you using social pressure to humiliate and ostracize. These are different, but they are still aspects of hard power. Whereas soft power, as what Nye tried to understand soft power being, was very much tied to what he would call the concept of attractiveness. And therefore, this is something you can see in Max Weber. Max Weber's classic, at the end of his, in many places, on charisma. He talked about charisma and the role of charisma. In his posthumous published Economy and Society, he talks about the infamous three forms of leadership or rule. A Herrenschaft in German. The famous talk about the three forms. And this is why, and it's in Nye's 2008 book, Power is the Lead, while he's talking about leadership and the connection between leadership and soft power, he mentions Weber. Weber's three concepts is, he says, and this is something sociology students talk about this, about leadership, authority. They call the word Herrenschaft means leadership or ruling, kind of like the leader, the ruler. It's often translated as authority. Okay, the question of authority, who has the right to rule, and the legitimacy of the rule. And he would argue that there were basically three types. First is what we say customary tradition. In other words, the custom of a tradition of someone. People's traditions and customs. This is the way we do it. This is the way people actually did it. Our ancestors did it this way. In other words, therefore, authority could be based on customs, traditions, habits of a community. These are tied to how we did things in the past. In fact, this is mostly traditional societies operate on this. Now, Weber then distinguishes this kind of authority from what he then says is legalistic rationalistic. Now, legalistic rationalistic authority emerges when all of a sudden, instead of tradition, rational legalistic principles based on like a kind of an axiomatic legalistic system. The emergence of this is when you emerge with states and political rule rather than clan rule, family rule. Once we move into political society, then this legalistic, rationalistic authority emerges. And he likes to compare these two aspects, this traditional authority and legalistic, rationalistic authority, as two different approaches to authority, and therefore shapes us. Now, for the purposes of Nye kind of just doesn't really pay attention to the difference between legalistic and nationalist or traditionalist division. He focuses on the third criteria, charisma. And that is because charisma is I think very much tied to what Nye is struggling with to explain his concept of soft power. The earlier treaty, from 1996 is Power is to Lead. No, I think it was Power is to Lead book. No, Power is to Lead is the big book. There was Born to Lead. There's early 1990 book, History of the United States and the Global Power. Now, again, he mentions it here in the book. He says, I'll read the section there for a second. He goes, his earlier book got Bound to Lead. That's right, Bound to Lead. 1990 published. It was a textbook about American power. And it's trying to explain the even though American economic power and military power may have been declining post-Cold War to some degree, America still had immense ability to influence. And he explained this idea of American influence in terms of soft power tied to its attractiveness. And therefore this became very big in in international relations theory, and also people in business schools, that branding and things like this. In other words, attractiveness of your thing, a brand. In other words, Weber's concept of charisma is very much tied to the question of why do things get popular? Why do you like something? Why are you attracted to this versus that? And the concept in economics of branding and Weber's concept of charisma are very much tied in a certain sense. They have a certain logic to them. Attractiveness. For some reason, you get attracted. Why does the seller get attracted? Now, in his earlier books, he talks about seduction as a form of soft power. And I think that's correct. Again, that's Machiavelli's line. Machiavelli in The Prince talks about a ruler seducing, the ability to, in fact, leadership is a form of seduction. And seduction is a way, and often seduction is double-folded, one aimed at one's own subjects and aimed at other people. And thus, soft power, as seen as a foreign power concept, was often seen as the ability that America, through its attractiveness and the desirability of people towards America or the phenomena of the country in question, gives the attracted one power. Now, if you study sexual attraction, you know this. If someone is attracted to someone, or someone who wants somebody, the person that is wanted has power, has some influence, can influence. This is why, and this is why in some ways attractive people, beautiful people have the ability to influence other people as they're attracted. The people who are attracted are want to impress, want to imitate, wish to enjoy the company of, wish to participate in the company of, and therefore there is this attraction, the attraction towards to possess or to participate with or to share with, or even like in terms of erotic love, the desire to possess the beloved, right? This is tied to eros. In fact, charisma, there is something erotic in charisma. in the sense that the person who, in fact, that's why charismatic people people who emanate charisma often have a sexuality towards them by the people who are attracted to them. It's not a two-way street. Now, this is something I know a former student of mine who wrote to Nye talking about, he wrote a paper about Trump's charisma. And Nye wrote back to her saying, well, but the problem with charisma, it's saying about Trump's charisma, it's in the eyes of the beholder. Now, this comment of his, eyes of the beholder, really have to understand the nature of charisma or even soft power. Soft power is subjective. There is, in other words, it is more subjective than hard power. We can say, well, wait a minute, isn't hard power itself subjective? It's now coercion and money, financial things are a little less subjective. Why? Because these are, I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to kill you. If I'm saying that to you, now your belief in my ability to do that may vary, but the fact that if I'm able and you believe that I'm able, then you might be threatened. Okay, you might be fearful. In other words, yes, there is kind of the subject must react and have the appropriate fear, the appropriate fear or belief that this is harming. And that is also true with benefit. In other words, as you understand interest, that parties, I can buy you. But if you don't believe if I offer you something that you don't believe is really valuable to you or not good enough, it's not going to change your behavior. So carrots and sticks have a subjective aspect towards them, but their physicality and the consequences of them have more substance than attraction. And by the way, the problem of attraction is over time you can lose it. Like erotic love disappears. Once you possess something, you can lose it. Now, the danger of charisma is burnout. In other words, once people who have been very much charisma towards something, they go to it, and then what happens is the famous problem of Bismarck and sausage making. In other words, you get to know something more closer and closer. You attracted to it, but then once you get to know it, your knowledge of it sours you towards it, or you see that you no longer just see the good things, you see the bad things as well. You get close and personal, and what ends up happening is that what was first attraction now becomes repulsion, and this is what soft power. You have to understand that the nature of soft power and the danger of soft power is this problem. Now, this is, we can say, with anti-Americanism. In other words, the opposite of charisma, the charisma's opposite is repulsion. And this is, in other words, attractiveness and revulsion of something, or being repulsed by, are basically connected to each other. They're the opposites of each other. I'm attracted to something versus I'm repelled by it. This is something that is very much tied to each other and are connected to each other in ways that we don't always fully understand or explain. And I think this is why soft power is really misapplied greatly in many places. And I'm tempted to write something about this because of it's been bothering me about this thing. I constantly read the literature and I read stuff on soft power, and I'm always sitting here saying, well, wait a minute. Don't you see that this is charisma? This is attractiveness, and that therefore to understand soft power, you have to understand the subjective character of attraction. In other words, as long as something is attractive. Now, and this is the other part. Soft power often rests upon hard power. Well, Machiavelli had a very useful story about this. Who are we attracted to? We are attracted to things that are valuable. We are not attracted to people who are weak and despicable. We are attracted to people who we think are virtuous or beautiful or good or wealthy or something like this. In other words, there has to be some benefit, some utility. And it attracted to, what made America attractive was the fact that for a long time, America was the place where people could flee people would go from their escape their hellhole, their shitholes, as Trump said, and I think correctly said. People come to America not to often bring their hellhole with them, but to escape their hellhole. As Victor Hansen talks about his experience with his neighbors who are from Mexico, southern Mexico, who come to live with him in the area of California. He says they don't come there to bring Mexico with them. They came there to escape that thing. And and that's why this is a thing that's very interesting in this sense, that America's attractiveness is very much tied to what it is. Now, if America loses what it is and because something else, then its attractiveness could end. Its attractiveness might end. Now, another attractiveness of America is its wealth, is its prosperity, is the fact that people go there because why? You can become rich, you can start a business, it's easier to own property. It's, in other words, the law relatively works compared to much of the developing world. In other words, people who the importance of class isn't very much important. Well, but that's changing too, as the new globalists, as the new elites emerge because of the homogenization by technology and industry. In the past 30 years have created a new trans bi-coastal elite that are controlling all capital and all institutions, and that they have a status amongst themselves. They're married with themselves. This is something that you see in the Charles Murray's book Coming Apart, and other literature about how America is coming apart because what's happening is we're breaking up, or we're breaking into groups that have no common identity, and an elite, a ruling elite, economic elite that is multicultural, multiracial. Yes, it's dominated by white Europeans, but it's still more inclusive. What matters is the wealth and the power of their wealth and education, that they go to the same schools, they go to the same thing, they intermarry, they control all the positions. So you have now an elite that really controls everything, and this is what may no longer. In other words, as America looks like a third world country, as America become a third world country, will America be attractive? Now, like the same thing. Let's look at China. Let's look at the Olympics. In other words, the Chinese government are hoping that the Olympics would be a good PR sell, but it's not. The more you look at China, the more you look at the way China is, what happens? Familiarity breeds contempt. In other words, you see the sausage making, as Bismarck says. Once you see how things are, what happens? In other words, the Chinese and many of, and actually this is a lot of the problem of this. This is why IR scholarship needs stronger understandings of political theory and classical political theory, is because IR theory is such a shallow, narrow construct. It's simplistic. IR theory is not that deep. It's basically positivism and post-positivism ideas, which need to have stronger idea. The realism, neorealism, liberalism, neoliberalism, core of IR theory is positivistic, rationalistic. The attack on the post-positivistic stuff of constructivism and the various gender theory and blah 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 of constructivist, post-constructivist IR theory is anti-rationalistic, anti-positivistic. But what happens is political science is what it is. its causality structures. So you either get a genealogical approaches. Therefore, what happens is the bifurcation of IR theory and international relations. Either you get descriptive genealogical structures of power, which is more common in Europe, and the more American positivistic, rationalistic modeling. Okay, and that's there is a poverty in IR in that sense, and you can see this. This is made evident in Nye's how shallow Nye's concept of soft power ultimately is. I say this not to criticize Nye in that sense. I think Nye as a diplomat and as a thing like this offers some understanding of why things happen. But at the same time, as a theorist, as someone who's creating a theory, his concept of soft power is fundamentally flawed, because I think he needs to understand that he needs to elaborate the fundamental subjectivity of soft power. In other words, it's all in the eye of the beholder. In other words, a Uyghur or Tibetan is not going to have the same attitude to China than someone who lives far, far away, who can, in other words, who looks at China from a naive perspective, and that may look interesting. Oh, Chinese food, Chinese food, cool. This is like, ooh, interesting culture. In other words, there's a superficial attractiveness. The question is superficial attractiveness sufficiently powerful to get people to agree to do things? In other words, what this is about is what power is about getting people to do things, to act in a way that benefit you. Now, rule is a form of power. Rule means what? I govern you so that what happens? Usually, everyone is acted to achieve a common goal, or to benefit the rulers mostly, or to benefit a class within it. In other words, the classic concept of any rule is the question of who's benefiting. Does the rule benefit the rulers or the ruled, or is there a common benefit? This is something Weber's analysis doesn't really. He skips this. He kind of jumps this question and rather looks at the structures that underlie rule. In other words, is it from custom and habit? Is it from rationality? Or is it from this attractiveness? And Weber's account misses out repulsion. And I think this is what's interesting. Weber's account, and we understand Weber died. Weber did not live to the end of his life. His life was cut short because he was killed during the great pandemic of 1918, 1919, the Spanish flu pandemic. And what happened was that he was one of the victims. And because why? Well, as a German, we have to remember what happened in Germany. Germany was, under the First World War, was suffering from lack of food because of the boycotts, the cutoffs. The trade cutoffs, and the Kaiser, unlike Hitler, did not enslave. In other words, the Germans during the Second World War didn't have the food problem in the First World War. Why? Because what the Nazis did was the Nazis didn't go on war economy, complete total war economy, to end of August 1944. And the other thing they did was, as they conquered the people that they conquered, they employed as slave labor on their farms and their businesses, industry. So that as they took workers away from the workforce, they didn't have to mobilize as the Western European countries did, that include women immediately in the workforce, and they were using slave populations in order to feed themselves. In other words, they didn't have the crisis of the First World War, where by the end of the First World War, they did not have, they were having food shortages, and they were drastically hurt. And that made by the way, the food shortages and the lack of food in Germany led to why the Spanish flu was so devastating. Weber was one of the victims of this. So I mean, we're talking about pandemic, right? our pandemic is nothing compared to the Spanish pandemic in terms of death and the effects of it. Weber would have lived a longer life. If Weber lived longer, his treatment of charisma probably would be more flushed out than it is. So I'm not going to blame Weber for the lack of his completeness of thought at this, even though it is, he sees one aspect of attractiveness. He doesn't take the reverse of it. In other words, and I think that's an aspect which thinkers should think about. Political thinkers and theorists should look at the question of repulsion, how repulsion can be as much a force to cause people to act or to behave. In other words, if I don't like you, if I hate you, that is actually, we see this with the demonization of the other. Now, we saw that with the Nazis demonizing the Jews. We see this now with the left in America and the elites in America demonizing the white working class as the deplorables, as the other, as the unredeemable, either from Obama's clingers to McCain's, the crazies, to Hillary Clinton's, the deplorables. All of this was a kind of attempt to belittle and minimize of this and otherizing in that sense. And I think this is an aspect of the nature of the repugnant. I remember in 1999, Leon Kass having an article in the New Republic about the power of repugnance. And I think Leon Kass's article on this was actually very good, even though at the time people were angry at it and criticized it, saying that, oh, how dare you use repugnant? Because he was trying to make an argument that certain things like abortion and other things, because of what it is, the repugnant character of the aborted fetus or this thing, once you present it in light in a certain way, what happens is that our natural revulsion towards it. And he actually did it with homosexuality. In other words, there's something that that there's certain acts like drag queen story hour, transvestite. There's something and I'm going to get in trouble with this. Fundamentally, most people will look at this and say, disgust. Seeing drag queens and seeing people transvestites, seeing people dressed, go to Berlin during the gay pride march. You see people dressed up with S&M gear and dildos, and things like this. Most people will look at that and say, "Oh God, okay." The question is, this is that famous thing about in our personalities, our types, how much levels of disgust you have, and as people who study political psychology tell us that there's a connection between aspects of people with high levels of disgust and conservative values, and people with low levels of disgust. In other words, they don't have they're immune. They don't get disgusted. They tend to be leftists and progressives. So disgust is a kind of value. People who have kind of issues with disgust, and that's tied to attractiveness. In other words, repulsion and attractiveness are kind of opposite but linked phenomena. And I think this is very important to understand, that, in other words, attractiveness and again, like, is in the eye of the beholder. In other words, what may attract one person may repulse another person. Okay, and therefore, political ability to influence and get people to act and in other words, I'm able to influence people to do things, is based on the ability that motivate people. And motivation is either through attraction or repulsion. So if charisma is the ability to motivate and to attract, what is the negative force that maybe we should think about? In other words, that is revulsion, is this also a powerful force? Now, the liberals will say, "Oh my God, prejudice! We should overcome prejudice." But no, we're animals. We're human beings. We have animals. We are both going to be attracted and repulsed. And if repulsion is a factor that can influence behavior, it is a tool that if you don't utilize, you are foolish. Okay, So let's think about that for a second. And I think this is a good point to kind of end. I've been talking about this for a while, and you guys are probably tired of this 30 minutes. Again, this was about soft power, the limits of soft power. We'll see how it is. Okay, take care, and I will try to do this again, maybe with a better camera. Do with the other camera, not this one. If I do this one, this is the camera that we got for Christmas. The problem with it is it's angled look, and for some reason I want to look at I'm not camera trained yet. Okay, so I will let you go. I'm planning again. Please leave a message and please pass it to a friend. I am going to be doing a series on book 5 of the Politics. I hope to do it. I've been trying to do it. I need to get off my ass and just get on do it every day. Okie dokie. Bye bye.